Welcome to Revenge Truth Channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. In today's video, you'll follow Isabella, a 42-year-old mother, as she embarks on an unexpected getaway with her 22-year-old son. After years of quietly enduring the loneliness of a loveless marriage, days spent in the stillness of nature, by the sea and inside a modest wooden cabin gradually peel away the hardened shell around her heart. There's no drama, no anger, just quiet moments, unmasked questions, and the genuine affection of a son that slowly helps her rediscover herself. This is a journey of healing, gentle, subtle yet unexpectedly profound. When my son turned to me and snapped a photo of me standing still in the snowy woods, he said, "Mom, you look like someone about to start over." I'm Isabella, 42 years old, a mother, a wife, and a woman who once lost herself in the years spent living for others. But that trip, just the three of us by the quiet sea and in a small snow-covered cabin, made me realize I don't need anyone's permission to live true to who I am. Have you ever experienced a moment that awakened you like that? Share your thoughts, because sometimes it's the real stories that help us see ourselves the clearest. My name is Amelie, 42 years old, a single mother who has just come through the most difficult years after divorce. My life revolved around work bills and a house, always materially sufficient but void of life. I can't remember the last time I truly laughed. Perhaps it was even before Oliver, my son, grew up and left for college. Then, one early autumn afternoon, as I returned home from work with heavy shoulders, Oliver suddenly appeared at my doorstep, carrying a backpack and a gentle smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Mom," he said as we sat drinking tea in the old kitchen, "I have a slightly crazy idea. I rented the old wooden house by the sea, the one that belonged to Grandma and Grandpa, just for a few days. I think you need a break. We need a break, just you and me." I almost laughed. A week-long getaway. While I was still juggling bills, not to mention work. But there was no insistence in Oliver's eyes, just a simple invitation from a grown son looking at his mother as if she was someone who needed to be saved. And I said yes. A wooden house nestled between rows of pine trees and faced the ocean. The early autumn wind blew wildly, carrying the scent of salt and the sound of waves. The old house remained the same, simple, a bit dusty but strangely familiar. Oliver carefully unlocked the door, then gestured for me to step in first. In that moment, I felt as if I had stepped out of the cramped, noisy routine of daily life and into another world. One without phone calls or pack schedules. We've got warm blankets, a mining gas stove, a few books, and a Della Uno carts, Oliver said, eyes gleaming, and you won't have to do a thing. I've got it all covered. I smiled, both touched and surprised. The little boy who once begged me to sing him to sleep was now unloading the trunk, swiftly arranging everything into this cozy little house. As the sunset settled, the three of us sat on the porch, warm teacups in hand, eyes toward the sea waves lapped gently at the sandy shore, and the last rays of sunlight streamed through the glass, casting a soft golden hue over my hair. I said nothing. I simply watched Oliver as he gazed into the distance, calm but still holding onto a youthful light in his eyes. He didn't say much, but somehow Oliver's presence made me feel safe, that feeling I had forgotten for a long time. The first morning at the seaside cabin began with a familiar sound, the steady rhythm of waves and the gentle scent of hot coffee drifting through the slightly open window. I woke up slowly, unhurried, with no alarm, no emails. In that moment, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I woke up without feeling pressure or emptiness. Oliver was in the kitchen, his back to me, hair slightly tousled, wearing one of his father's old t-shirts. When I stepped in, he turned and smiled. "You're up. I made coffee just the way you like it, less sugar, more milk, and stirred counterclockwise." "Course mean, why can you still remember that?" "More than you think," he replied, handing me a warm mug in the soft morning light of the wooden kitchen. I could clearly see the fine lines at the corners of my eyes, reflected in his traces of time I had almost forgotten I carried. After breakfast, we tidied up the cabin. Together we dusted, rearranged old books, and opened the curtains to let sunlight flood the small room. Every action, no matter how small, made me feel as though I were reviving some forgotten part of myself. The part that once found joy in travel in afternoons, reading by the window, and in long meandering conversations. That afternoon we took a walk along the shore. The sea wasn't loud, just quiet waves brushing against the sand like the ancient whispers of time. The sand was cool beneath our feet and the air was both crisp and tender, just like my heart, filled with many emotions, yet starting to let the light seep through. Oliver talked about life in the city, about friends, and about moments of feeling lost in a crowd. Despite smiling brightly, I listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes watching him for a long time, as if trying to memorize every expression on this young man's face. The same boy who used to cling to me in dreams, now grown enough to lead me through life's uncertainties. "I used to be mad at you for always being so quiet," Oliver said, suddenly stopping in his tracks. I turned to look at him, but now I get it. Sometimes silence is how we protect ourselves because we're too tired to explain. "And I see you now, Mom, you were really lonely. Weren't you?" That question, gentle as it was, caught in my throat. I nodded, my eyes following our footprints in the sand. Yes, I was very lonely, but not because no one was around. It was because I slowly lost myself without even noticing. Oliver didn't say anything more. He simply reached out and took my hand, not as a child clutching a mother's hand, but as a friend, a companion. His hand was warm and firm, something I had forgotten. I needed so badly. That night we played a game of Uno under the soft yellow light. I kept losing and Oliver laughed until he nearly fell over, like he'd become that teenage boy again. "Mom, you're too easy to read," he teased. I pretended to pout, but inside I felt light as air before bed. I stood by the window, looking out at the sea. The waves were still calm, the wind still blew, and I, a 42-year-old woman no longer young, no longer full of glittering dreams, suddenly realized I could still begin again. I could still love and be loved in the simplest way possible, through genuine presence and a hand to hold when I needed it. The next morning, the sky turned overcast. Gray clouds stretched out like a thick blanket draped across the sky, creating an oddly quiet atmosphere. I woke up to the sound of raindrops tapping softly on the wooden roof. Oliver had been up early, sitting out on the porch with a leather notebook open in front of him, a pen in hand as if he were writing something deeply personal. I didn't disturb him silently. I made coffee and brought it out, placing it gently on the wooden table. He looked up and smiled. "I'm writing a journal, don't laugh, just joking down things. I'm afraid I'll forget." I nodded gently. "I used to do that all through college and then I stopped. When I became a wife, a mother," I replied. My voice as light as the clouds. At some point, the things I thought about just stopped feeling important. Oliver was silent. I saw in his eyes a familiar inner conflict. Part of him wanted to ask more. Part of him was afraid it would make me sad. "Mom," he began, "when you were my age, who do you want to become?" I was caught off guard. I couldn't remember the last time someone had asked me that, propping my chin on my hand. I looked out toward the distant sea. The silver-tipped waves gently lapped the shore, as if waiting for an honest answer. "When I was your age, I loved writing," I said, my eyes blurring as a wave of memories rose to the surface. "I wanted to study literature, study abroad, write novels. I once imagined 99 of worlds. Then I met your father. Everything changed so quickly." Oliver didn't interrupt. He let me continue as if he knew I was speaking this aloud for the first time in decades. "I don't regret having you," I said. "But I did resent myself for giving up on dreams too soon." Not feel my voice catch, not from regret, but from the unfamiliar permission. To be honest, to be seen as a person with unfulfilled dreams, not just a mother or a wife or a woman who had chosen the safe path. Oliver set down his notebook and tilted his head to look at me. "I always thought you were so strong, but today I see you're really living." I laughed, tears spilling before I could stop them. "I'm just starting again. Sweetheart, after 42 years, I'm finally learning how to live the way I once dreamed." Oliver pulled a small item from his backpack. The old tape recorder his dad once used. Tell me, Mom, about the stories you used to write. I want to hear them. I looked to him surprised and deeply moved, and then I began. I told him about a girl who once dreamed of living in a city that never slept, who used to write for hours under a desk lamp, who had her first short story published in a teen magazine. I told him, my voice trembling but steady, and Oliver listened like a child, hanging on every word his mother told before bedtime, but this time listening to the woman behind the word Mom. That night, as I closed my new notebook, the one where I began to rewrite memories I thought I had forgotten, I knew I had taken a big step, not back into the past, but toward the part of me that had been buried under all the years of busy living outside. The rain had stopped, a cool breeze swept in through the slightly open window. I exhaled deeply, feeling weightless for the first time in a long while. I felt that I was no longer just a silent shadow, standing on the sidelines of everyone else's priorities. I am Isabella, 42 years old, a woman learning to write the unfinished story of her own life. The next morning, the sky was unexpectedly clear. The sky stretched out like a giant pane of glass, and the sea sparkled under the sunlight. Oliver walked into the room with messy hair, a towel slung over his shoulder, and 3 chilled pineapple smoothies in hand. Mom, dare to get into water with me today? He asked, his eyes gleaming like a little boy, inviting his mom into a new game. I looked out the window and saw a few people walking along the shore, leaving short and long footprints in the sand. There was a time when I used to run along the beach for no reason. I used to laugh uncontrollably when the waves soaked my dress. I wasn't afraid of the cold or the wetness. I simply lived fully in the moment. I'll probably just dip my feet, I replied, a little hesitant. As long as you come out there, Oliver said, I'll take care of the rest. We walked along the beach together. The sand was warm under our feet and gentle waves lapped at our ankles. Oliver ran ahead, raised his phone camera and shouted. Isabella, 42 years old, stepping into the sea for the first time after years of just watching. Let's see if she'll actually jump into the waves. Burial, laughing. Delete that clip right now if you ever want to eat my cooking again. No way, this is historical footage. And then, whether it was the sun, my son's laughter, or something inside me, suddenly waking up, I ran forward and plunged straight into the icy water. My body tightened from the shock, but then the cold turned into a shout of pure exhilaration. Oliver yelled, yes, that's my mom. We laughed together as if washing away years of built-up worries. I had never imagined that simply stepping into the water could help me rediscover a piece of youth that had been forgotten for far too long. In the afternoon, I sat wrapped in a towel, my hair still wet, on a wooden chair facing the sea. Oliver handed me a cup of hot cocoa. He whispered, You look so much happier. 'Cause I just beat myself, I replied softly. Oliver didn't say anything more. He just placed his hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture. But I understood it as a quiet nod to a new chapter. Beginning that night, I opened my journal and wrote a short line. Today I stepped into the sea, not to swim but to remind myself I still can. That night, the sea was unusually calm. The wind had stopped howling like it had on previous nights, leaving only the soft murmur of waves like whispers into the soul. Oliver had gone to bed early. Through a full day of activity, I quietly closed his bedroom door, then stepped out onto the porch carrying a cup of hot chamomile tea in my old leather notebook. The one I used to take everywhere but hadn't dared to write in for a long time. I looked out toward the dark horizon where the sea and sky melted into one without a line between them, then opened the notebook and put pen to paper. Dear Thomas, I'm not sure if you'll ever read these words. Maybe I'll tear this up. Maybe I'll hide it away forever. But tonight, here with the sea, the wind, and myself, I need to say everything. And years ago I chose to walk beside you out of love, out of a dream of building a home. But over time I stopped seeing myself. In our quiet dinners you were busy and I shrank into the role of mother homemaker, the one who reminded you of all the little things. And then I fell silent, not because I didn't want to speak, but because I knew you no longer listen. I used to blame you, resent you, want to leave, want to do something drastic just to be seen. But I didn't. I chose to stay for our child, for our family. But Thomas, have you ever wondered the woman who once dreamed of writing books, of traveling to Paris, of opening a little flower shop? Where did she go? She didn't disappear, she went quiet, she is me. And now, at 42, I'm slowly calling her back. Write this letter not to accused, but simply to say, I no longer want to live as a shadow. I don't want to be absent from my own life, whether you still love me or not, whether we can stay together or not. Want to live. Honestly. This time. For myself, I closed the notebook. There were no tears, just a weightless feeling like someone had finally taken off a backpack I'd worn for too long. I took a deep breath and touched the cool wooden railing of the porch. The sea still beat its steady rhythm. So did my heart. Steady but no longer silent. When I returned to the room, Oliver was asleep on his side, breathing steadily, watching him. I smiled. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a son sensitive enough to notice his mother slowly sinking and reach out to pull her back up. I didn't need to send that letter to a mass, but I knew from now on everything I do will be the truest answers I could ever get. The next morning I woke up as sunlight slipped through the cracks in the door, gentle like nature's own caress from the kitchen. The sound of chopping and the buttery scent of toasted bread filled the little wooden house with an oddly comforting warmth. I stepped out, still dazed from a long night, full of emotions too complex to name. Oliver was standing at the kitchen counter wearing a white t-shirt and fabric shorts, his hair slightly messy, eyes focused as he sprinkled dill over a pan of eggs. I smiled softly. The mischievous boy from years ago had become a man, quiet, mature, and full of care. Sit down, Mom, almost done, he said without turning around. His voice was light, like the sea breeze in the early morning lane. After a simple but delicious breakfast, Oliver invited me for a walk along the beach. The sea was unusually calm today, the water a pale blue, thin like silk. The sky above stretched endlessly without a cloud in sight. We walked without speaking, just listening to the sound of waves and our footsteps crunching softly against the damp sand. When we reached a rocky outcrop, Oliver stopped and pulled a small camera from his pocket. Stand there, Mom, right where the light hits you sideways. You look like someone about to take flight. I laughed but followed his direction. Oliver raised the camera and silently took a shot. Done, he said. Handing me the camera, I looked at the photo, then stood still in the frame, me wearing an earth-tone sweater, standing alone against the pale golden sand, the slanted sunlight making my hair look like it was glowing. My face slightly turned, eyes gazing out toward the distant sea. You look strong, Oliver said, still looking at me like someone about to begin her own journey, and I turned to look at my son. My heart tightened in his eyes. There wasn't just the tenderness of a child for his mother, but also recognition, the gaze of a grown man seeing a woman being reborn. Bliss. I held the camera. Look at the photo again. No filters, no posing, just me. Real and a lie. You took a beautiful shot, I said, because you're beautiful. Oliver replied with a smile, then looked out toward the horizon. We both sat on a nearby rock. The waves gently splashed at our feet. Neither of us said another word, but I felt something very clearly. My son saw me not just as a mother, not just as a woman carrying sadness, but as a person coming back to life. That photo, I knew I would keep it safe as a reminder, as a silent message from Oliver. You can begin again. You deserve that. When we returned to the cabin, clouds had started to gather, but it didn't feel gloomy. It felt profound and full of hope. And inside me a voice spoke softly. But surely I'm coming back, not to where I was, but back to myself. That night, the wind rose from the sea pine branches outside Russell as they brushed against each other, and the waves murmured like they were telling old stories. Inside the small cabin, the light from the fireplace cast soft flickering shadows on the wall like memories. I sat in the wool-upholstered armchair holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. Oliver was quietly tidying up the dishes in the kitchen as he always did. We had shared many beautiful moments throughout this trip, but now the air held a different kind of silence, dense, waiting. I looked out the window. The sky was deep black, not a single star in sight. Suddenly I spoke without looking at him. Oliver, if you were me, what would you do when your partner has turned away for so long that you forget who you used to be? The sound of running water stopped. I heard a chair being pulled out. Oliver sat down next to me, silent for a long moment. I think if I were you, I wouldn't go back to a place where I'm no longer truly seen. He said softly, but firmly, I'd go where I can be myself again. I turned to look at him. His eyes were clear and honest, so much so that they left me speechless. Used to be so afraid that Daniel would be angry, afraid the family would fall apart, afraid of judgment from others. But in this moment, in the quiet of night beside the sun, who had grown up and now looked at me with deep understanding, I wasn't afraid anymore. Do you want me to go back to your father? I asked as a way of probing my son's thoughts. Oliver didn't answer. Right away, he lowered his head, then looked up and replied, slowly, I want you to go back to yourself first. If you haven't found who you are again, then going back to anyone else won't mean anything. I said nothing more, just nodded gently and reached out to take his hand. That warm, steady hand, the hand that had helped lift me up both literally and figuratively. We sat like that for a long time, not a word spoken, but some things don't need to be said to be understood. In the cabin, deep in the dark forest, the fire continued to crackle softly, and I for the first time in years felt weightless, as if I had just set down an old suitcase filled with weary hopes and drained illusions. I knew there was still a long road ahead, but at least I had made the first choice, a quiet yet unmistakable choice. I would not go back to being the silent wife. I would return to being Isabella, the woman who knows who she is and knows what she deserves. The pale sunlight of our last morning filtered through the curtains, casting soft light onto my hands, resting on the windowsill. The snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of withered grass and the uneven dirt path. Outside the cabin, the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air. Familiar and achingly comforting, Oliver was packing in the back. The atmosphere inside the cabin was quiet, but it no longer felt heavy. Instead, it carried a sense of peace, as if everything had been gently put back into place after a silent storm. Ollie touched the photo Oliver had taken yesterday of me standing against the snowy sky, looking toward the horizon. He had sent it to me with a message. You look like someone about to rewrite her story. I smiled for the first time in a long while. I believed I could. Car rolled away from the pine forest, leaving behind the small wooden cabin. I glanced back through the rear-viewed mirror. A part of me didn't want to leave, but I knew the next journey wasn't back there. It was within me, the woman sitting in the passenger seat, holding an old scarf gently in her lap, eyes fixed on the road ahead. We drove for hours before the cell signal returned. My phone buzzed a message from Thomas. I'm back. Are you okay? I stared at those words. For a long time I didn't rush to reply, not because I was angry or avoiding it, but because for the first time in years I realized I didn't need to hurry to explain myself or please anyone anymore. I turned to Oliver. He was focused on the road, eyes alert but calm. I said softly, almost as if to myself, this time I'll live as myself, no longer waiting to be seen. He didn't respond, but I saw the corner of his lips curve into a quiet, knowing smile. Some things between a mother and her son don't need to be said out loud. That afternoon we arrived home. Everything was just as we had left it, the crooked painting, the flickering desk lamp, the little potted plant on the porch shrinking against the cold wind. But I no longer felt lonely walking through the door. I left my suitcase outside and walked around the house as if reacquainting myself with a once familiar place where I had long lost touch with who I was. My hand grazed the kitchen counter, the window frame that had once held old dreams. Everything whispering the past has passed, but I can still begin again. That night I wrote in my journal, not a letter to send, not blame or hope for someone else to respond. Just words for myself. I'm still here. I'm still whole and I can still love, starting with myself. When the lights went out and the night wind whispered outside, I lay down with a heart no longer shut tight. There may still be days when I stumble, feel lost, or long for what once was. But I know now I have a new anchor. Courage found in quiet and kinship and in the unjudging eyes of the sun. I once thought I knew entirely that journey didn't begin in the cabin, it began within. In the moment I dared to ask myself, who am I when I'm no longer just a wife, a mother, or the keeper of the home? And finally I found the answer. That trip wasn't just a winter getaway. It was a journey of return, not a return home, but a return to Isabella's true self, a woman who had once forgotten that she too had the right to be vulnerable, to dream, and to begin again from the smallest of things. The silence of the snowy forest, the slips and stumbles on the white ground, the cups of cocoa by the fireplace, and the gaze of her son. None of it was meant to take her far away, but rather to bring her closer to the part of her soul that had been left behind. The greatest lesson Isabella came to realize wasn't how to heal through others, but the courage to see her own worth, even when no one else recognized it. And perhaps the most beautiful thing in any mother's journey isn't the sacrifice to hold everything together, but the bravery to let go of old roles so that she herself may live, may breathe, may simply be. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories.